Golic and Smetty here. Welcome to another edition of Golic and Smetty. I'm Mike Golic Sr. She is Jessica Smetana. I guess we can call this maybe the road trip version right now. We're coming off the holiday weekend, Memorial Day. First and foremost, obviously, I know by the time this will be released, we're recording it a day after Memorial Day, are certainly that day, that holiday we call it, has such meaning. My father was in the Marine Corps. I'm sure so many people out there have family that served or know of those that served, and it's just an incredible day of remembrance for just, what people have done. So this holiday, as they call it, Jess, and I know it is because people get the day off of work, but it just seems weird to me sometimes because, we're talking about people who have given their lives, for our freedom, but it's always a special one for me.
Yeah, so you should explain what the background noise is that we're all hearing right now, Mike.
So you're right. I should have done that first. I am on a road trip. Me and my wife and my son Jake and our 3 dogs, the 2 pugs, Hank and Harry, and Ted, our bulldog. So after I was done at ESPN, we sold our place in Connecticut, and I have a house at Notre Dame and I have a house in Scottsdale. So I was at Notre Dame from last April to November, and then we were in Scottsdale from November to just now. And then what we do is we have this Sprinter, Mercedes Sprinter van that's decked out in the backlit with Airstream, like, a shower and bathroom and like a sink and like it folds out to a bed. It's very cool. And at this point anyway, great Wi-Fi. So, hey.
Okay.
Time to sponsor us, gang. We're using your stuff and the Wi-Fi works really well. So let's go. So I'm in the back right now. Jake's driving. I got Hank is laying down.
Oh, cute. Okay, that's one pug. His
go.
tongue is straight out of his mouth. Okay.
Yeah. And I can't flip this camera. The other pug, Harry and Ted, our bulldog, are up front right now.
Wow.
So you definitely will see my camera shake a little bit as I'm in the back and a little bit of noise as well.
I also see like all of your earthly possessions appear to be packed up behind you right now.
They're in the back, and my son Jake is like the greatest Tetris packer of all time. I mean, because that's what it is about, fitting everything. Because we're not taking it we use in both places, but it's got to be packed well, and he's done a great job doing that. So yeah, we have that going. We left Arizona on Memorial Day, and we are now driving through the plains of Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
And so we've gone Arizona, through New Mexico, through the top of Texas, Oklahoma, we'll go through Missouri, and we will stay, and then our last stop will be, we already spent the night once, we'll make it to Springfield, Illinois, and then we'll have about a 4 or 5 hour drive on the last day to kick it on into South Bend. So
it doesn't sound too bad.
It's really not. We stop every couple hours for the dogs. They were great the first day. Then we stay in a hotel, and they love it. It's like an adventure. So it's a lot of fun. Did you do road trips growing up or anything?
Oh my gosh,
stuff like this?
Yes. My family went on tons of road trips. We used to drive like medium road trips distance-wise from Chicago to Pittsburgh, and then Pittsburgh to Chicago a lot. And then we do longer road trips to South Carolina like twice a year, because I have some friends and family down there, and so those were the multi-day trips. So my family was big into audiobooks. I don't know if you guys like listen to audiobooks or music, but that's always a debate when you're road tripping with people, is like books versus podcasts versus music.
We are music. I amazingly enough, now living in the podcast world, don't listen to a lot of podcasts, which is, I know it's kind of weird. I love listening to music. We have not really got the audio books. I remember when Greenie and I wrote a book and we had to do the audio for, oh my God.
Terrible.
Oh my God. What a pain in the ass that is.
Why?
But yeah, they wanted us to make an audio book so people could listen to it on the road when they were road tripping, I guess.
But
So,
like, you're like a radio professional, and the audiobook was too much of a
oh,
pain in the ass for you.
yes,
You just have to
yes, it was.
read. It's so
Yes.
much easier than just talking.
Do you know why it was tougher, Jess? Because I had to read good or
Oh,
well.
okay.
Yeah, in radio I can sound like an idiot and people understand that. You know, if I make the slightest mistake, where on radio nobody would give a shit, but when it's an audiobook they need it perfect. So the amount of Greeny was phenomenal at it because he's a great reader.
Yeah,
I kept
I can see
making
that.
mistakes over and over. So yeah, it sucked. I did not like it at all. We didn't do much road tripping. I think really one of the first road trips we took that was multi-day was when my brother Bob was I think a freshman or a sophomore at Notre Dame. They played in the Gator Bowl, and we were in
Oh.
Cleveland, and we drove down to the Gator Bowl, which was in Florida. Let me just tell you, I'm not going to lie, driving in a Sprinter van decked out Airstream is a great way to travel. I feel a bit spoiled. I wish I had this when we went to the Gator Bowl. It is very, very nice. So hopefully the connection holds up, and I'm talking big about it, and I hope it works and we go through. But so again, that is why you'll hear some noise, because we are over the Great Plains of Oklahoma, approaching Tulsa, I think, at the recording.
Your audio has only cut out like 4 or 5 times so far, so far so good, Mike. I think we're gonna make it.
Oh God. Okay, sorry about that. Hopefully,
That's okay.
hopefully, yeah. But we used to do picnics all the time, like for the holidays, you know, Labor Day, Memorial Day, the 4th of July. My parents were in this club called Club Unique growing up, and we'd meet at this park that had an upper level with like a basketball court and a volleyball court. A next level down, we had horseshoe pits and a grill, and then you go down once more to a beach right there on Lake Erie in Cleveland. And just about all the guys in the club were part of a military branch. So obviously, again, Memorial Day was always a big one for us. But I mean, Jess, we went to this picnic from when I was a kid all the way to taking my kids to this picnic. That's how long it ran. It always brings back memories when I hit these holidays of going to these picnics, and that's where you're so close with all these people, you just call them your aunt and uncle.
Yeah.
You know, it's very cool. So always good memories for me around the holidays.
Yes, absolutely. And to your point, both of my grandfathers fought in World War II and Korea. So Memorial Day is obviously a very special one. So happy belated Memorial Day
Yes.
to everybody. Hopefully it was a pleasant weekend. We actually had good weather in the Northeast for once on Memorial Day. Usually it's like the rainy, crappy weekend that you think is going to be the start of summer, and then it just disappoints you, but it was actually pretty nice this time. So
It seemed like it was. I know there was some crappy weather in Hartford for the semis of the men's lacrosse.
yes,
I know my son
Mike
Mike
was there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He's been in the booth for calling lacrosse for ESPN. He loves it. We'll get into, but from a sports side, Jess, there's a lot I want to get into. We'll start with the NBA, but even the racing that went on in Monaco and the Indy 500. While those races went on and there's things to talk about, I have bigger questions about those, more general questions I think that might interest some people. But really, it's got to start in the NBA with what went on there. The Celtics, yet another 7-game series after they beat Milwaukee in 7 games. They beat Miami on the road in a 7-game series. And I mean, it almost seemed like a series of attrition with the injuries that had gone on both sides. Who was going to last till the end? Last couple of games, Jimmy Butler's playing the entire game, scores 47 in game 35 in the loss. But boy, so now Boston has made, this is their 22nd NBA final. They're 17-4 in the finals. Only the Lakers with 32 finals appearances has more. But Boston hasn't been there since, I think, 2000 and, is it 2010? I got to look. I wrote it down somewhere. I'll try and find. I think it was 2010 that they hadn't been there. And for Golden State, it's been 6 of the last 8 seasons. They have been in the finals. 3 titles by their core of Steph, Clay, and Draymond. So what did you think of this? I know Levitard and Stugotz and the whole crew that are down in Miami. I know you live down there, but you haven't been down there and able to pull that Game 7 off at home.
Yeah, well, it just seemed like Miami didn't have the juice in the second half of the series, right? Like, Jimmy Butler's been battling knee inflammation all season. He missed a couple games. Tyler Hero was out. He played in Game 7, but He didn't seem to be 100%. They're a team that like gets they've been really like hot shooters in their playoff run so far, and like weren't at all in the games in Boston. So like just seems like a lot of things went wrong for them. And I mean, you can get all the heat analysis you want on the Le Batard show, but having watched all 7 games of the series, it definitely seems like they kind of just ran out of juice. And whether it's injuries or just like not, being hot at the right time or whatever, just poor playoff performances, I guess. The Celtics looked really good. Like they have a team that I think Ime Udoka is getting a lot of credit for putting together like a really great team in the second half of the season and like picking up, some of the issues that they had to start off the season and fixing some of those. And I don't know, it seems like, it's the playoffs, so you got to be hot at the right time. I'm not like a basketball analysis wizard, but the Celtics just seem like they have all the pieces, right? And the Heat just didn't feel that way at all in the series.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You sit there and look at now the finals and first finishing that game 7, it was great listening to the announcers. Van Gundy didn't Boston has 7 times they had double-digit leads in this game, but Miami kept coming back because all of a sudden Miami starts doubling Tatum. He's kicking the ball to Marcus Smart, who never met a shot he didn't like, and is just hoisting threes and clanking them. He hit some early, but he's starting to clank them at the end. And by the way, I'm a huge Marcus Smart fan, huge. But he's missing threes, and all of a sudden Miami's getting back into this thing, because of Jimmy Butler. And with 15 seconds to go, they got a little bit of a fast break. You got Butler on Horford. They're down 2. And while some said maybe Jimmy should have drove on Horford's backing off. Jimmy had a wide open 3.
Yeah.
And he missed it. You know what? I had zero problem with that. Jeff Van Gundy did. And Mark Jackson they both said something correctly. Mark Jackson said, well, you got to be able to live with that, which I think Miami is. And Jeff Van Gundy correctly said, yes, and you have to be able to die with that as well, which is what they did because he missed that. But I know he's not a great 3-point shooter, but I did not have a problem with that 3-point shot at all. Yes, exactly.
He was the reason that they even were in Game 7 to begin with because of his performance in Game 6. So, I mean, I don't know. I think, like, I personally really like Jimmy Butler. He played at the Bulls before he was in Miami. He's just always been someone that I've kind of rooted for. I think he definitely deserves a championship, but it seems like unless he's fully 100% healthy and able to have those games with this specific team, the way it's constructed, they're not going to be championship, they're not going to be in the finals. Like, there's going to be someone who's going to be able to beat them. So, and that being said, I don't know who your favorite is to win. I still think Golden State would beat either of those teams. We'll see. The Celtics, I think, are certainly going to be able to put up a better fight, but the the Warriors are still my favorite to win the championship. That hasn't changed since the first round of the playoffs.
I agree. I think they're going to win. DraftKings Sportsbook has them for the finals, the whole finals, at -150, Celtics at 130. Game 1, it is Boston. Actually, they're both at -110. Boston knows a 3.5-point underdog in Game 1. I love some of the odds. We won't spend a ton of time on this because the finals just last forever.
Yes.
Forever. It is like a half a freaking regular season within the finals because it lasts so long. So we have plenty of time to talk about it. Finals MVP, Steph is +110, Tatum is +170.
There's so much time in between the games that you forget that the finals are happening, like between games 1 and 2. Like an entire long weekend will pass, and you'll be like, oh yeah, those are on TV. I forgot because the last game was a week and a half ago. It's crazy.
Completely agree. I think the most fun prop bet, again, on the DraftKings Sportsbook, is the longest shot made in the finals. So at the end of the finals, they'll take the longest shot. And the best odds are actually the longest shot only being 25 to 29 feet. That's +2,000. But someone's with Steph. Oh my God. I mean, so 40 feet plus is +1,000, 35 to 39 +215, and 30 to 34 is -185. So that's some fun prop bet stuff. I still like Golden State. I'm with you, Jess, in this one. I think getting some of the injured players back as well, like Iguodala, Porter Jr., and Peyton II, that maybe integrated back into practice in the lineup, I think is going to help them. But what I like, maybe as a former defensive player, these are two of the top defensive efficiency teams. So I love the wing guarding against a Clay and against a Steph, how that's going to go, with Tatum and Marcus Smart and what he is able to do. So that's the part, the lockdown. So so much on this, Jets, is going to be how are the officials going to call this one? How tight are they going to call it?
I love that you're like hitting some bumps right now, and I'm just like watching.
Oh yeah, I'm
watching
bouncing
your computer
everywhere.
Fly.
Yeah, bouncing everywhere, man. I'm sorry if this is a train wreck. This is just what we got.
No, it's all good. It's fun. It's a road trip edition of Golic and Smetty. Speaking of cars and road trips, Mike, Formula One was in Monaco this weekend, which is probably the biggest event on the Formula One calendar, although definitively not the best race, so to speak, on the calendar.
No.
People do not. A lot of Formula One fans don't like the racing at Monaco, but kind of like the spectacle of Monaco, because it's where all these mega wealthy people park their yachts for the weekend, and a lot of celebrities go there, and a lot of the drivers actually live there. So Monaco was this weekend. It was kind of a crazy race, despite most people thinking that it's pretty boring. There was a lot of drama surrounding the race on Sunday, with a rain delay that then the Formula One stewards said was because of a power outage. They had to delay the race, and then there was a whole issue of it being too wet to then race after they already went on the track. It was like a whole fiasco to start the race. So the race was delayed I think an hour, and then there was a lot of drama in the race itself with the decision making by Ferrari's team, and specifically with Charles Leclerc, who by all accounts had the lead in the race, should have won, but their team completely botched his pit lane strategy and which tires he should have on and when. And so Red Bull ends up winning, with Sergio Perez winning his first Monaco Grand Prix, which was awesome because he is like one of the most liked drivers on the grid. Like, all the other drivers really like him apparently, and so it was cool to see him win. But it was a very interesting one, Mike. I'm not sure if you watched, what your thoughts were.
Oh, I did, and I'm deep into Drive to Survive now, so I'm in the last season of that, and I'm a big fan of Checo's as well. So I was happy he got the win. Sainz gets second, and Verstappen gets third. So the Red Bull team goes 1-3 here, and I'm gonna get into that in a second. But yeah, Leclerc, I mean, he was so ticked off at the how they blew those pit stops. I mean, they cost him. So there's that. There's Ferrari filed a protest at the end saying, I think it was Perez and Max both had a pit lane violation, which is interesting because in the Indy 500 that came up as well.
Really?
Pit lane violation. So we'll get to it did. So I'll get to that. But the protest went nowhere. The who you said, place. That's how it was, 1, 2, 3. But then the interesting part, and this is, and oh, by the way, love Monaco, the scene, hate Monaco, the race. You can't pass, Jess.
Oh, it's so frustrating. The last few laps were so frustrating to watch because the top 4 cars were just in a train and no one could pass anyone because there's just no space. They're driving on old city streets. There's no passing lanes basically in the whole race.
Passed more cars in the last minute on the highway here than were passes that went on at Monaco. I mean, and they were talking about they need to change because, again, one of their big sponsors is Tag Heuer for F1. It's Rolex, and they don't pay a lot of money, does Monaco, for this. It's a spectacle, and it's such a big-time thing. But in all honesty, I hate the course. Boring's the wrong word because there was some drama with the rain and everything. But if there's no rain, I mean, there's barely any drama.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, so it's really hard to overtake, but what was interesting about this race was that if they had started on time and there had been this last-minute scramble, like once the race started, to put on wet tires, it could have actually been kind of interesting, but of course the stewards were concerned about safety, and then the rain started getting really heavy, which they probably would have ended up pausing the race during the really heavy rain regardless, but they could have at least had a few laps in with like the medium rain, and then that would have made things more interesting because instead of having like racing, overtaking. The only action really happened in the pit lanes with the strategy. Right. So if you are someone who really likes dissecting, pit lane strategy, this was a great race because of the decisions Ferrari made and the decisions Red Bull made. Red Bull's ultimately winning them the race. Ferrari's ultimately losing the race for Charles Leclerc, but Carlos Sainz was able to make the correct determination for himself and kind of like overrule his team.
Right.
And ended up in second, but it was just like kind of a fiasco. So I'm with you. Like it's definitely not the most interesting track. I still think it's cool. Like I would still, if I was wealthy enough, attend the race. It would be awesome to go there. But it's just like a totally crazy scene apparently.
I would go for the casinos alone, quite honestly. Like I said, it's a good looking venue, but yeah, the race just not a lot to it. So, but here's one of the big questions I wanted to ask is, and I found it, Jess, a lot through the Drive to Survive, is, there's obviously 10 teams and 20 drivers who, for some reason, they call teammates. There is nothing representing the two drivers driving for the same deal, team that says teammates. They are the furthest thing from teammates. After this race, Max Verstappen's dad went off in a blog saying they prioritized Checo over my son and it should have been the other way around. I mean, how do you call each other teammates? The first thing in this Drive to Survive is you hear these guys say is, my first goal is to beat my teammate. I mean, it's the wildest thing. This is part of it again. For those that don't know, I'm pretty new to F1 and I'm learning and I love it. I'm fascinated by it. But the teammate portion of this, to me, in F1.
Yeah, well, so like every team has like, their number one driver and their number two driver, and they don't necessarily say that out loud most of the time, but like you kind of know, like, okay, Mercedes' number one driver is Lewis Hamilton, although this season he's not been as good as his teammate George Russell. Right. So when there's like a situation where, like in Spain, Sergio Perez is ahead of Max Verstappen and they want Sergio Perez to give the spot back to Verstappen because they think Verstappen is the title contender and Perez isn't. Perez was like, I don't like this. This is, he said like, that's unfair, but he did it. He acquiesced because he kind of knows his standing on the team. Now he's won this weekend and there's, a lot of people wondering, well, maybe he's a title contender too. So maybe this, instead of Leclerc and Verstappen being, the two contenders, because, Ferrari's a mess strategically, maybe it's going to come down to Checo and Max Verstappen, which would be interesting. But sometimes your teammate does help you out. Like if you're doing it, like it just depends on the race. Like if you need your teammate to defend for you, and this happened last season in Abu Dhabi, Sergio Perez defended from Hamilton for a few laps and was able to trip him up, so he wasn't able to gain as big of a lead on Verstappen, which ended up mattering or not mattering, depending on how you look at like the whole controversy that happened after that. But sometimes your teammate, if they're in the lead and there's a car trying to get ahead of them, they can, slow them down and help you out. But there is like the dynamic between the teammates, I think, is one of the most fascinating things about the sport. Because like you said, it's like you're still competing against each other, but you have, the same colors on, essentially. It's not really like any other team sport, quote unquote.
Yeah, it's wild. You get your teammate, Verstappen's teammate, wins, and the first thing out is Verstappen's dad blogging about how he didn't like how the race finished. It's like, wow. I mean, so again, maybe this is more I need to learn about the sport, because I'm sure there is defending out there. And again, I'm sure in Drive to Survive, they're doing the most dramatic parts.
Oh, definitely.
A lot of times of that. So maybe it's not as bad as I think, but it brings up another question in the other big race over the weekend, the Indy 500. And I remember getting to cover that one time. Greeny and I did a show there on a Thursday before the race on those turns, which is just unbelievable. And won this year by Marcus Ericsson, a former F1 driver.
Yeah.
Who kind of, I haven't read the whole story, but maybe didn't get treated as well as a lot of people thought he should have in F1. So he's now in the Oval at Indy, and he wins it. And by the way, a record purse, 3.1 mil. Not too bad, for a race. But I know that they've asked like others, like Max Verstappen said he would never do Indy. He thinks it's too dangerous.
He said he'd never risk his life doing
Yeah.
IndyCar. And I'm like, well, like to an average person, like F1 seems pretty dangerous too. Although like they have made a lot of safety adjustments
Right.
over the past few years. So, I don't know. I prefer my sports to not have any danger level, which is unrealistic, especially
Right.
as a football fan. But it's funny to hear one guy who goes like 180 miles an hour to 200 miles an hour say that the guy going 230 miles per hour is
Yeah.
crazy and like he'd never do that. Just
Yeah.
to the average person, it's like unfathomable that anyone does any of these things.
I'm with you, but he said no chance. And what I didn't know is that there's this motor triple crown, which is Monaco, Indy, and the 24-hour Le Mans.
Yeah.
And I know Verstappen had said he'd probably do some of the endurance racing like a Le Mans, but he will never do Indy. But we always get crossover there because we've seen Indy go to NASCAR and the other way around. Like Jimmy Johnson, 7-time NASCAR Cup champ. He raced in the Indy here, and he got rookie of the race, by the way. I think he crashed a little bit before the end and was out, but it's cool to see the crossover here. So that brought up another question to me, but congratulations to Marcus Ericsson. I mean, 3.1 mil. Oh, and in that one, when I mentioned another pit lane situation, one in Monaco, this one, Scott Dixon led for 95 of the 200 laps in this, right? But he had a pit road speeding penalty that cost him. Too fast in pit road. So as I think our buddy from ESPN, Marty McGee, had said, you can get a speeding ticket at an auto race. And that's exactly what he did. And it basically cost him. I think he ended up finishing 21st in this. But I started thinking, some of these guys that are crossing over, what other sport, if you had to do another, you were soccer, correct?
Yeah.
So if you had to play another sport, what other sport would it have been?
Oh my God, I don't know. I'm not that athletic, Mike. What would you have done other than football?
I would have wrestled because I was a wrestler in high school and a wrestler
Okay, well
at
then
Notre Dame.
besides wrestling and football, because you did wrestling.
Right. I loved swimming. It's the first competitive sport I did. I loved it. I swam. Then I started gaining weight, and I started not going as fast in the pool because I did pretty well swimming. Went to a couple of national meets, and then the wrestling went pretty good. My brother Bob, for those that may not know, my brother Bob wrestled at Notre Dame. Bob would have won the NCAA championship his senior year, but the bowl game he played in that right before was the Cotton Bowl, the chicken soup game, the famous chicken soup game,
the chicken soup
where
game.
Joe Montana was sick and had chicken soup at halftime. They came back and won. My brother Bob hurt his knee in that game, and he had to get ready for the draft, so he didn't wrestle his senior year. He'd have won. His junior year, he took third. His sophomore year, he took fourth. He was a great wrestler. And this was back when you could not do two sports in the Olympics. Like now you see, remember Herschel Walker did football and then bobsledding. Well, you couldn't do it back then. Bob, I think, would have had a chance in the 80 Olympics in wrestling, but he would have had to, because he got drafted in 79, he would have had to wait a year, not go in the NFL draft. And turns out anyway, the 80 Olympics, you're too young maybe to remember, we boycotted those Olympics, so we didn't go anyway. So
yeah, I was definitely too young to remember that. I think to answer your question, Mike, I probably would have become like a pro golfer. I feel like I would have thrived. Like when I was younger, I hated golf because it was too boring and slow. But now as a mature adult, I enjoy being on the golf course more. So maybe that would have been my thing.
Well, you got a great swing. I saw it on Instagram. You guys played in that one tournament. You got a really nice swing, so that would work out well for you. But yeah, so I enjoyed a lot of what went on over the weekend, including we have become we're a big lacrosse family now. When we first moved to Connecticut from Arizona, when I started at ESPN, Mike was 10, Jake was 9, Sydney I think was 5, and the boys always played baseball, and I managed them in Little League Baseball. But that was our first introduction in Connecticut to lacrosse. And our boys were always bigger than everybody else. Jake was bigger and faster than everybody else, which made for a deadly combination. So they both saw lacrosse and said, wait a minute, we can hit people and use a stick. And I'm like, yeah. And they never picked up a baseball bat again. And they played lacrosse. Jake was a midi and on defense. Jake spent so much time in the penalty box, just destroying kids. You know, probably not the greatest in the world, but man, when he went running after someone, we just started clearing out the penalty box, knowing that that he was going to end up there. But then when Mike got to Notre Dame, he roomed with a lacrosse kid, Sean Rogers. So he had been huge into lacrosse. We followed Notre Dame lacrosse forever, and they've been doing very well. First time out of the tournament actually this year in a long time. So we've been big lacrosse fans, and both the championships were over the weekend. On the women's side, North Carolina, both champs, by the way, undefeated for the season. North Carolina beat Boston College 12-11. They finished 22-0 on the year. I got to give really quick, because I don't know, some people aren't as into the non-revenue or the non-big sports. But as I said, these athletes, because I've got to know a lot of them, from lacrosse players to soccer players to swimmers, work just as hard or harder than the revenue sports, the football and the basketball players. So to see them put the time in, this young lady from Boston College, Charlotte North, she had 4 goals in the game. She's the all-time leading scorer in NCAA history, considered probably the greatest lacrosse player, women's lacrosse player of all time in this. She was incredible to watch, but also she only made four goals on 10 shots because she was defended by a young lady named, I'm going to say Emma Trenchard. I hope I'm pronouncing that correct. 4-time first-team All-American. So, I mean, What a great matchup for that. But excellent game. So huge, and this was a team in North Carolina in the semis. They were down 8 to Northwestern, and they came back and won that game to get into the finals. So congrats to them. Fun game, 12-11. BC scored with about 15 seconds to go. So they had to get the face-off and have a chance, but North Carolina got the face-off, and that was the end of the game. But a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, lacrosse is fun. I agree. So Charlotte North ended up with 92 goals this season, which she already broke the record for all-time NCAA goals. So now she's added to it. So now she has 358 career goals. And the record before that was from Courtney Murphy, who had 341 goals when she was at Stony Brook. So, I mean, that's just, incredible. So, like you said, she's probably one of the best college lacrosse players of all time, I think is fair to say.
Yeah. So that was fun to watch. And then quick shout out to Maryland on the men's side. As I said, last Saturday in Hartford, it was rain delays and the whole deal, but they got to the finals, Maryland and Cornell. Maryland won that one 9-7. They finished 18-0 on the season, their 4th title. The last one was in 2017. And kudos to Logan Wisnauskas, who had 4 points in the game, 2 goals, 2 assists, the first Maryland player to have 100 points in a season. So kudos to him. 7-2, they were up at half. Going into the third quarter, 2 more goals, they were up 9-2, and everybody thought, oh no, this game's going to be a blowout. Cornell makes a nice run to get it to 9-7, but that's as close as they got. So congrats to the North Carolina women and the Maryland men on their titles. It's always a fun weekend. A lot of great softball and baseball that went on over the weekend.
Yeah, Mike, I fully expect a College World Series and softball College World Series rundown from you on next week's show also. I know that those are starting soon, and you seem to be on top of your NCAA sports.
I do. I love it. Listen, I'm one of those guys that watches any Olympic sport, from archery to curling. I just love it, because I understand the time aspect that these athletes put into it, no matter the sport. I don't care if it's darts or archery. It doesn't matter to me. I love watching it. But the baseball and softball go so long. My God, they get out of school and they finish, the teams that make it all the way to the end, they get, a couple of weeks off, and they're probably friggin' back in school again.
I've always thought that was so unfair.
Yes.
I didn't play any spring sports obviously in college, but I always felt bad leaving after finals week, and then all the teams would still be there. All my girlfriends who played lacrosse and softball would be like, well, we can't move out yet, we're still here. And then they stay until mid-June or even late June, and everyone else is gone. I mean, they all love it, obviously. I don't know if they all love it, but they like being with their teams and they like competing, because if you're still there late into the spring, it means you've probably made it pretty far in the tournaments and you're probably pretty good. But I always my favorite thing was moving out and leaving college for the summer, going to wherever I was going to do an internship or job or whatever it was, because after a certain point you're just ready to leave. But
you're absolutely ready to leave. Yeah, it goes for a while. Remember last year, Notre Dame made it to the regionals down Mississippi State which is a great place to watch a game, by the way. That was a lot of fun. But so yeah, I'll definitely have coverage for you on that. So let's end this thing if we can on, because I'm sure people are going to be like, oh my God, they didn't talk any Notre Dame. Well, I guess I mentioned a little bit of it. And no football. Football is never out of the news, but it involves baseball to talk about football. Did you see this between Joc Pederson and Tommy Pham, the two baseball players, got in a little fight over fantasy football rules? I mean, how crazy is that?
I still can't believe this story. So Pham, he slapped Pederson in the face on video before a game, and apparently it stemmed from, I guess Pederson was putting players on IR who were injured during like their fantasy football season to circumvent the rules and like have a little bit of an advantage. So, you know, his players were on IR, but I don't know, this like, it's funny, but it's also like deeply disturbing. I feel like this is so, like he slapped him in the face. Like that is such like you're taking it to such an insane level when you're going up to someone and publicly slapping them in the face over fantasy football.
So here is Pham's quote. This, you know, one word we've been hearing, especially in basketball a lot, Jess, is the code. Don't break the code. This is unbelievable. Now listen, I don't play a ton of fantasy football. I do the DraftKings the Sunday. We have a whole group that picks our team on Sundays and do it that way. I don't have enough myself personally patience to go in and out, make trades, set lineups and all that. But we obviously know that so many people love it. So as you said, Pham slapped Joc Pederson, and this is what he said. I slapped Joc. He said some shit I don't condone. I had to address it. It was regarding my former team, the Padres. I didn't like that, and I didn't like the sketchy shit going on in fantasy. We had too much money on the line, so I look at it like there's a code. You're effing with my money. Then you're going to say some disrespectful shit. There's a code to this. I'm like, oh my God, there's a code to this? I had no idea.
I feel like the code of living in society is like not to hit people though. Like, I mean, he could have just said all of that and not hit him in the face, and then everyone would be like, wow, that's so shitty. Like, don't do that in fantasy football. Like, you're being a bad fantasy football player, right? The hitting is just a whole nother level, Mike.
It's kind of like the Will Smith and Chris Rock thing. You can have a problem with what he said about your wife, but you don't walk on stage and punch him.
Well, so he got suspended for 3 games, right?
Yes, he was suspended for 3 games. And here's Joc Pederson responding to what I just read Pham saying. Joc Pederson acknowledged to reporters that, quote, there was a lot of money involved and said Pham was telling the truth. Oh my God. It blows my mind.
So bizarre.
Oh, man. I mean, but listen, I know so many people. Well, listen, a lot of the players, they say they get asked all the time when they're out in public about fantasy, what they think, how many they're going to score, what they think they're going to do this year. And it's all about fantasy football. It's crazy how big that's become.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think if there's a moral to the story, it's like settle your beefs in the group chat. If you need to, like, you know, tell people like, hey, this guy's being sketchy, like,
yeah.
We've all played fantasy football. We know that that's a little sketchy, but maybe don't hit him in the face, especially when people are watching.
Yeah.
Because now he's suspended. He's not going to get paid for 3 games.
And it had nothing to do with his sport. And it had nothing to do with some of the, obviously, the serious bullshit we see off the field with athletes. This, I got to know, has anybody ever got suspended over dealing with fantasy football in a different sport than what you're playing? I mean, and you're right. Handle it in the concourse, in the, you know, go to his locker room. You did it out in the outfield. You slap him upside his head. Oh my God. I mean, it is, but man, it just shows you how serious people take this shit. It's unreal.
Yeah, that's true. Don't mess with people's money, I guess.
Well, that is true too. I guess that is true. So Jess, that's about all I got. I hope I didn't mess it up too badly. I hope it can all be fixed with our audio. We just drove through Tulsa, and we will continue on and see how this trip goes. I'll give you one last look. We saw Hank in the beginning. Hank was so riveted by this. There he is.
Oh. Oh my gosh. How is his tongue always outside of his mouth? Is my
It's always out.
question.
Always out. And,
Does he
and
not
it gets
have front
dry.
teeth?
He's had some teeth pulled. Pugs have some issues with teeth, so he has had some teeth pulled, but he's
pug.
fine. That tongue's out. It's like a piece of beef jerky when it dries.
Ew.
Yeah, I know.
Well, Mike, I enjoyed listening to. I hope this entertained you on your road trip. Now you can
It
go
did.
put your music back on, and I hope that this was maybe a good distraction from the beautiful plains of Oklahoma for a little bit. So.
It's very flat. It is very flat, but I'm enjoying it. So next week, well, thank God we'll have the NBA Finals that will have started, so we'll have that to talk about.
Yeah, we'll
as
be
that
on
lasts.
game. We'll be probably on game 1
Yeah.
only. Yeah, and then game
Exactly.
2 will be the following week.
That is so true. But so until then, hopefully, so like we said, a lot more going on. And if you don't hear from me next week, that means the rest of the trip didn't go so well. But hopefully it will.
Oh God.
Yeah, I know. That's pretty morbid, isn't it? So until next week, safe travels for me. And I don't know, where are you? Are you back in Miami yet?
I will be soon.
Well, safe travels for you
Thank
as well,
you.
and everybody out there who traveled on the holiday weekend. I hope it all went smooth and safe for y'all as well.